The answer is there is nefarious financing going on here.
When you say nefarious financing, who is that?
There are Islamists out there who want to see their values ingrained in certain parts and certain communities across our country. We're talking about a government asleep at the wheel, and also willing to overlook because of political expediency.
Just to be clear, you're directly suggesting the Labour Party are turning a blind eye to extremism. Tonight, too many across the political and media class are too squeamish, too right-on, or just too cowardly to talk about what's actually happening. Fear of being branded racist or getting cancelled or, frankly, blown up means we pussyfoot around the rise of Islamic extremism on our streets, in our courts and in our parliaments. The rise of political Islam in Britain has happened before our very eyes, but too many mouths have remained closed. Well, not on this show. Last month, the race in Victoria Park, organised by the East London Mosque, banned the participation of women. In Britain's inner cities, from Tower Hamlets to the north, pro-Gaza MPs and sectarian movements are redrawing the political map. An alliance of Islamic fundamentalists, hard-left socialists and environmentalists threaten the stability of the British government from the hard left. And who are these new politicians? Well, let's meet one. Iqbal Mohammed, a British independent MP who ran on that pro-Palestine platform, claiming in a speech that the West is amongst one of the enemies to be faced.
So let's make a promise to each other to work together in unison. Let the West, let the enemies not divide us.
Let the enemies not divide us, the enemies including the West. So what's really going on and why? Joining me to discuss all of that live from Washington DC is the Free Beacon's John Levine. John, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but first we're joined by Faith Matters' Fiyaz Mughal from London. Good evening, Fiyaz. What is going on? It seems to me, from where I'm sitting here in DC, the rise of sectarianism in British politics is cantering at quite a pace now.
It is. I've been doing work pretty much on countering extremism since 7/7 with the government and successive governments in the UK. And I've never seen sectarianism and fractionation in our communities so bad. And actually, the reality is this kind of mentality, the mentality actually that the West is a problem, the West is a risk to Muslims, the West should be something that we do not adopt the values of. This kind of talk is really quite significant across parts of communities now. And it is really shameful to see elected members, elected leaders in our House of Commons, and even local authority members repeating this kind of divisive nonsense.
It feels to me that, the problem with Islamic extremism is I don't need to tell you, and you can tell our listeners and viewers in far more details than I possibly can, have been slightly separate to everyday politics. Obviously, the divisions and fractions in the British political system are increasing by the day, but it does seem to me there's now a concerted effort to bypass the traditional party system and actually launch a series of quite extremist MPs into the House of Commons. Is that organised or is that organic?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think there is some organisation behind it and a sense that actually MPs that can be launched with these kind of sectarian and highly divisive and even inflammatory perspectives are kind of representative of certain parts and certain regions of our country. There's that element, which is exceptionally, I would say, depressing given that kind of division. But there is also an organic set of movements which are, in effect, devolved of any engagement with community values, devolved of any engagement of national values, that sees things within the wider country as being problematic to them, that sees the values of wider society as being a threat to them. And within that segment lies the elements of the potential for radicalization. And we know when the radicalization happens, whilst it's not a clear trajectory, certainly radicalization is one significant factor that does actually lead at certain points for extremism and terrorism. So the reality is it's a bit of both.
In Tower Hamlets, though, it looks pretty coordinated. Lutfur Rahman was, was mayor once. He was banned from public office for a period of time. He then relaunched his political movement and has completely, dominated and taken over a large part of East London's local politics. There were 5 independent pro-Gaza MPs, the platform they stood on at the last election, but they came pretty close to taking out a number of Labour cabinet ministers, not least Wes Streeting, a man in the news tonight for his political machinations in Parliament. But a number of senior Labour figures are having this sort of this threat breathing down their necks. Who is funding it? Are they organised? And is there cause of concern that there could be threats to bypass the normal sort of democratic norms?
Well, the answer is there is nefarious financing going on here.
When you say nefarious financing, who is that?
Well, it's private individuals who've got a lot of money in these parts of community. So they're businessmen, mostly businessmen who have made money, who believe in this kind of ideology, this kind of thinking, this sense. Also, some of them thinking that, quote, Islam is under attack, so we must defend it. And defense means getting one of these elected members into parliament and starting to change opinion. So we've got businessmen who are wealthy, who are certainly donating to this, but we've also got to look at the wider network of what's happening internationally. Look, we got to keep our eyes and ears open. There are countries that are engaging in our local and national politics.
Which countries do you mean? Because I can think of, Pakistan being quite high on that list.
But Pakistan is certainly kind of high on that list. It's not the Pakistani government. Let me just make very clear around that. But certainly Islamist groups have enormous influence because of the language, the culture, engagement with diaspora communities here in the UK. But there are other countries in the Middle East who have actually, again, invested and given sums of money for social projects here in the UK. And again, those are problematic because they will deem Muslims like me, who are open-minded, liberal, totally, I don't feel disengaged from the West. The West is me. They will attack people like me. They will undermine. They will be well organised to come after us.
It happened directly to you, did it? When you were Michael Gove tried to appoint you as an advisory role in government, and you were threatened for that.
I was threatened by that. There were people who were mobbing me on social media. It was well organised. So go back to your point. This is well organised. Some of it is grassroots, but there is an organisation behind it. And let's not also miss the fundamental point. There are Islamists out there who want to see their values ingrained in certain parts and certain communities across our country. But they're not the only ones. There are people who kind of feel totally marginalised, who also actually kind of think, well, wider society is not a part of me. And again, they are potentially part of the issue going forward.
Can I get your response to the ITV Good Morning presenter Adil Ray, who posted on social media congratulating the new mayor of New York, Mandami, saying that some say Mandami may implement Sharia law. He might. The heart of Sharia law is social justice, welfare, fairness, charity and cohesion. He obviously landed in a bit of hot water of that. Can I get your response to that sort of mainstreaming of what 3, 5, 10 years ago would have been considered quite a radical view?
Indeed. I mean, when he was talking, I thought he was talking about some kind of really lovely affair of having tea and cakes in New York or something like that. It was a really lovely event. The reality is, how can anyone say that in today's modern values and look through the lens of that to effectively what are 7th, 8th and 9th century traditions? The reality is that's one way of looking at it, but let's look at the whole picture, because I know Sharia, there are elements that were progressive for the 7th, 8th and 9th century, which are not progressive for modern day life. And there are elements in there which are exceptionally cancerous, like attacks on LGBT communities and killing of them, like the potential to wipe out minorities, like women's rights. So for a presenter to say in 2025 through these lenses and goggles, oh, let's look at this schmaltzy, lovely thing, is ludicrous. It is utterly ludicrous.
And how do we tackle it? You run an organisation that is designed to tackle extremism. It's similar, I believe, to the community trust that focuses on the Jewish community. When you've got daytime TV presenters mainstreaming, as you say, cancerous 8th century radicalism on the sofa of Britain's most watched television shows, we're through the looking glass now, aren't we?
Through the looking glass, right? This is mainstreamed. We are having people who are saying, then went on and said, oh, Sharia is not that bad. We have individuals now who are also trying to work with this government, which previous governments would not have touched with a barge pole because of their value systems. They're basically, unfortunately, I have to say this, basically the walls have opened up and we've got people coming in through the doors into seats of our government in terms of influence. But not only that, people in public life saying, oh, well, Sharia is all this cuddly, lovely, bubbly.
Mind-boggling.
It is utterly mind-boggling because actually, as a Muslim, you have to look at the totality of that law. It is 6th, 7th, 8th century stuff. Anyone looking at it in 2025 would think we can't even look at it through the lens of 2025, first of all. And if we do in the totality of it, there are some absolutely horrific elements. And we need to call them out.
Are we past the point of not being able to do that, though, in terms of, you say, they've infiltrated, the highest levels of public office. There is very powerful groups within government departments, for example. Take the Home Office, take the BBC, frankly, the other one, big one in the news today. Community groups within the organisations are basically trying to set editorial guidance. They're trying to, in the Home Office, restrict investigations into grooming gangs. Any attempts to fundamentally bring down immigration hostilely. We're in a situation where we've kind of lost control, right?
We're pretty much on that verge, I would say. We're pretty much on the verge of that because there's more of them speaking and engaging and getting into the system. And with this government being asleep at the helm of knowing who they're dealing with, to overlook things right in their eyes on social media, written by people they engage with in parts of my community who have actually openly suggested October 7th was absolutely fine and the Labour government engages with them, right? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a government asleep at the wheel, and also willing to overlook because of political expediency, because they don't want to lose those seats, which they think they will lose anything between 5 and 10, maybe 15 other seats at the next election to independents coming through. So political expediency, asleep at the wheel, willing to overlook this is the problem as well.
Just to be clear, you're directly suggesting the Labour Party are turning a blind eye to extremism for fear of, people like Wes Streeting, who only had a majority of 500 at the last election, losing their seat. That's an incendiary situation.
Well, let me give you this example. If you are, how many times have frontline ministers in this government use the term Islamism? I can count probably on one hand the time they've used the term Islamism. Now, this is what we've come down to. Let's talk about cohesion. Let's talk about cuddliness. Let's talk about social cohesion. Let's not talk about Islamism and extremism and the Islamist narrative that has led to people being killed on our street. Let's not talk about that. So look at what we have right in front of us. If ministers are not openly speaking about it and only speaking on occasion about it versus the discussions in previous governments where to some degree they had a focus and then lost it on extremism, that in itself is telling.
I mean, how do we fix it, though? I mean, how, it's going to take, you say that this government is hamstrung by its political concerns. The last Labour government, the last Tory government had 14 years of sort of trying to deal with this. People like Michael Gove did try and take a stand, but he was shouted down and called racist, and, groups like Cage and Mend and even the Muslim Council of Britain all lined up to say how awful we are. I've written about these issues before countless times. I am bombarded with basically lawfare, which tries to sort of make it so complicated and so tedious to write anything about Muslim extremism in Britain without going complaints to the press regulator, complaints to Ofcom, complaints and letters to the editors. It seems to me that there's a sort of coordinated attempt to actually get to the situation we're in now and make sure that people like yourself don't go, hang on, what the hell are we doing here?
Precisely. Look, exactly that. I was speaking with a journalist the other day on a separate matter, and she said to me, I don't think I can go there on these matters of extremism. This is what we are dealing with. We're dealing with people being frightened of litigation, to getting bogged down in paperwork and complaints. This is happening. You've spoken the truth. I've heard this from so many people. So the reality is, with the few opposition MPs we have from other parties, we need to actively watch out, challenge, consistently call out, watch for what's happening within government. Even in today's government, the discussions around the Islamophobia definition, which I've been against, and I've worked on tackling anti-Muslim hatred. I've worked 13 years at the front line of this, so I kind of know what I'm doing. The fact of the matter is, with this definition, which I'm against because the laws are more than enough and robust enough to tackle those issues, they produced a report which has been provided to the Secretary of State. And now I'm hearing people are going in and quietly having a look at it because they're going to be producing something around a definition. And you think to yourself, the government's not really transparent. The government's really trying in many different ways to keep their agenda under wraps. And actually, the more we can outline it, the more we can highlight what they're up to, the more we can challenge, the more we call out Islamist extremism and all types of extremism, the better.
Fiyaz Mughal, powerful words there. Thank you for joining us tonight, and all power to your elbow on that task. And frankly, I don't like having to say it, but stay safe in everything that you do. Thank you for joining us tonight. John Levine from the Washington Free Beacon is here in the studio with me. And what do you make of that?
I agree with everything that man said, and I hate to agree with you. I hope he has private security, because we're living in a very different world, and you've seen it in our country too, with people, unfortunately, like Charlie Kirk. And with radical Islam, it's even a more extreme, more dangerous threat. There have been so many political assassinations in Europe for people who have spoken out so bravely as your last guest. So I certainly hope he's taking all necessary precautions.
John, you were in New York the night that Mandami won. He won fair and square.
I was a witness to the revolution.
He was elected fair and square by people that perhaps should have known better. But we'll park that issue for another day. He was all nice and soft and cuddly and, smiley and walking across Brooklyn Bridge with Bob Dylan lyrics playing in the campaign.
Right, that's always how.
Since then, the mayor of New York elect, he's not even in City Hall yet, but the mayor of New York elect has been a slightly grumpier figure. What did you give us? Give us where we're at.
You saw it immediately with his victory speech, and I was not allowed entry into Mamdani's party for obvious reasons. But I did head over to Cuomo's party, which was a lot more funereal. It was an open bar. It was amply attended, and Cuomo gave a very dignified concession speech. And I remember he said we need to work with Mamdani, and his own people booed him. And compare that to Zoran's victory speech, which was very ungracious. It was very uncharitable. And it was really sort of a political manifesto, and it was not talking about working with people. It was a lot of Arabic sprinkled in to his remarks as well. And I was talking to my friend, can you imagine if like a Jewish mayor of New York, like a Bloomberg, had just started whipping out some Hebrew in a speech or a victory speech like that? You'd never hear the end of it. And it was just very telling that the cuddly smiley face, I'm going to go to the gay club at 1 in the morning. It's all out the window now.
And then he went down to Puerto Rico, I think it was,
at a
over the weekend.
in Puerto Rico.
There he was in front of a crowd in mosques, people screaming Allah Akbar, and he was leading it. I didn't see that on the campaign then.
Yeah, Allah Akbar. A line, it's a joke, but it's not really a joke. Has anything good ever happened after somebody shouted Allah Akbar?
I mean, let's leaving aside that.
Okay.
Your words, not mine there.
Okay.
I don't want to get cancelled or blown up. Okay. But no, frankly, look, we talked at length there with Fiyaz about this situation in London. Large parts of East London are now, basically being run by extremist fundamentalists, infiltration of the normal political system by people with extreme views, daytime TV hosts talking about Sharia law. That's London. I mean, part of the element of the stuff we're trying to do with this show, as you well know, is looking at warnings from the old country for America. Where in America, and I'm beyond sort of New York and sort of Dearborn, Michigan, do we see this level of sectarian politics infiltrating the American system?
I'll tell you, the name of the town escapes me, but it was a small town in Minnesota that in 2023 they elected for the first time ever an all-Muslim city council. And it's a mostly non-Muslim town. It was one of these triumphs of progressivism. Look how progressive we are. It's all just a bunch of white Christians, but we've elected a Muslim city council. And the first thing they did was take down all the gay pride flags off all the public buildings. Mm-hmm. And it just shows you there is this alliance between the far left and radical Islam for which the common denominator is hatred of the West. Yeah. But if that alliance ever comes into power, the blue-haired psychos on the left, they get put against the wall. Well, that always happens.
I mean, that's already happening in the UK. Is actually the trans issue is going to be the one that really blows this.
Right. Do you think the Islamists and the trans who are on the same side now?
Well, it's like gays for Gaza, right?
It's like. Do you think if the gays for Gaza ever win that argument, they're going to end up so well? I don't think so. And this happened in Iran.
But why? I mean, that's kind of what. Fiyaz said was you kind of want to bang our heads against the wall of how have we got to this position and what do we do to get out of it? Because it seems to me like, as I said there, we are through the looking glass.
You got into this position, and we're heading into this position because we've imported millions of people into our countries who hate us and hate our values and do not want to assimilate, and instead want you and me and our countries to become more like the countries that they left. And Douglas Murray has a great line. You do not have to extend toleration and acceptance to people who would not extend that to you.
Presumably the Trump White House, though, isn't bound in the same way as far as we're saying the Labour Party and the Labour government in Britain, Keir Starmer's government, is basically a hostage to political fortune and is kowtowing to Islamic fundamentalists because they don't want to lose their seats.
Well, no, but, as I've always said, the longer you ignore the problem, the harder it is to fix. For example, President Trump can get rid of visas. He can even do stuff on green card holders. Fine, that's easy. But what do you do with, say, recently naturalized citizens? Someone like Mehdi Hassan, who is a citizen of the United States now. And he was someone that could have been deported a few years ago, but he was naturalized, and now he's a citizen. And now he'll be able to spread his poison and anti-Western invective, which is very well documented in your country and mine. And he'll be able to do that with the protection of American citizenship. But it's very, very hard now to deal with a problem like Mehdi Hassan. And the longer you don't deal with the problem in your country or mine, the more these kind of ideologies can take root. They will have children, they'll start families, and you'll have people raised from the cradle in your country who will say, I go back to where? Birmingham? But they will in fact not be from Birmingham, and they will not really be part of your polity.
I mean, there's an open invitation to Mehdi Hassan to come on this show, as he well knows, at any point to answer some of those points that John raises there. But again, it is that it's the political correctness of it, wasn't it? When we say, the attacker was British born or the attacker was American born. Yes, they were, but so were the 7/7 bombers. So were pretty much every Islamic terrorist who, the people that cut off Fusilier Rigby's head in Woolwich. I mean, there does need to seem to be, we're sort of tied up in political correctness that basically means we're having this bizarre conversations where we're basically saying that, if I moved to Japan, I would not become Japanese, right?
Right. The last time I was on this show, there was a British-born there was a terrorist attack in your country.
Indeed, there was.
A British-born person
named
and
Jihad.
His name was Jihad.
Yeah.
So this British-born business, we have to just take our heads out of the sand a little bit. And it's funny, these politicians who've been elected in your country, the Free Gaza, Free Palestine politicians. I hope your people are starting to wake up to the fact that that program comes with a lot more than just Gaza and Palestine. They're going to have a lot of ideas for what your country should look like as well. And I don't think you're going to like it. I don't think a lot of your people who watch this show are going to like it.